Hello everybody! So in this video we're going to be looking at editing your drone footage from beginning to end. In this video we're going to be looking at how we apply music, how we can use speed ramps, and how we can piece together all the footage to get the best results possible. In this video we're going to be using techniques that can be applied across all different pieces of software. I personally am going to be using DaVinci Resolve because it's a free piece of software. I'll drop a link in the top right hand corner now to show you how to download this for free. But it's also possible to do this on the DJI Fly app. And if I get enough interest, I can show you how to do that in a later video. You can also choose to do this in Premiere Pro, but I prefer to use DaVinci Resolve purely because it's free and it does everything that I need it to do. So let's get started. So in this video we're going to be looking at how to apply music, we're going to be looking at how to do speed ramps, reverse footage, and just how to combine everything to give it a nice finished look. So when we come onto the program, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have this screen here. Now you won't have all your footage up here. I've just done this to save time, but this will be pretty much the screen that you come to. If we come down here, we're currently on the cut menu. We want to move over onto the edit menu. So all we do is just click onto the edit menu. The next thing we're going to want to do is import all of our video files. To do this, we just come over to this box here, make sure we've got media pool selected, and then we can scroll down and either press Ctrl I, or we can just right click and then press add media or import media. Now from here we can just go to the folder our videos are in, select all the footage we want, and then just press open. Once it's opened, you'll see all your footage here in the media pool window. From here we can then click on the individual items and they will open up in our viewer window here. Now I've also gone through and chosen some music and I've imported this separately. Now I've gone and found this music off of YouTube. This is free to use as part of their creators pack, but there are other free websites where you can download music, and also you can use your own music. So I decided I wanted some inspiring music with a cinematic sound, and this was one of the many pieces of music that came up. I chose this piece in particular because it's got a lot of sound effects that will lend themselves to speed ramping, like this bit here. So the first thing I think is really important to do when we want to edit our videos is actually to import the music first. And we can do this by clicking the music and dragging it down into the audio channel down the bottom here. So we do this first because instead of importing the music onto the video, we actually want to import the video onto the music, and this will give us more impact and make it easier to achieve better results. So the first big tip from this video is to edit the video to the music and not the music to the video. So once we've dropped it on, we've got it laid out like so. I'm going to go back to the beginning of the music and listen to it. Now for this piece of music here, I think it'd be really cool to zoom out, and that's what came to mind when I listened to it. So what I'm going to do is I've got this piece of footage here, and I know that this is footage where I'm zooming out, and I'm going to press play or spacebar to watch it work. And I think this will work nicely. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to the beginning and I'm going to press I, and we can also click on this button here, and this means mark in, and this is going to be the section of the video we want to begin from. So after this I'm going to then scrub through and I'm going to find out where I want the video to finish. So it's going back, and then just before we stop I'm going to want to finish the footage there. So I'm going to press the O button. So I'm going to press 0 on the keyboard, or we can also press mark out. So the rest of the footage here we're not going to use in the timeline. Something else I forgot to mention is if we right click on here and we go to clip attributes, I'm actually going to change the frame rate from 29.97 to 30 frames per second. And this will just make it run smoother if we're not using a time ramp. And this will just make it smoother if we're not using a speed ramp. And I'm going to drop this down into our timeline here and see how it looks. I'm going to drag our marker back to the beginning and press spacebar. Now I think I've taken too much footage, so I'm going to go back a few frames by pressing the left arrow keys. and I'm going to press B. Now B brings us to our razor tool, and then we can come down here and click on the red line, and this is going to cut the footage along the red line. Once I've done that, I can press A, which is going to take us back to the cursor tool. I can select the leftover footage and just remove it by pressing delete. Next, I'm going to come over to this control here, and I'm going to move it over towards the plus side, and this is going to stretch out the timeline so we can see in finer detail exactly what we're doing. The video clip's still going to be the same length, but we've got more control over the finer details. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to press spacebar, and I'm going to listen to the music, and I'm going to find out where I want the scene to change. Now I'm going to want to transition in a significant beat of the music. To show you what I mean, I'm going to demonstrate this now. So just there on that chime is where I'm going to want to change to another piece of footage. And if you see just down here, there's just a little bump in the audio track which shows us exactly where that is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the right cursor key to push it along to that bump, and I'm going to click on the audio, and then I'm going to click this button here, and this is going to mark in exactly where that beat is. So as I said at the beginning of the footage, I also want to use this kind of sound here. As a speed ramp. Now a speed ramp is just where you can change the speed of the footage. So what I'm going to do now is click on the video, right click and go to retime controls. And this will show us our footage at 100% speed. So at the first part of the video, I'm going to want it to speed through and then stop going as fast when it gets to the end of the speedy sound effect. I'm sure speedy sound effect is a technical term. So I'm going to press play again, and we're going to scroll through the music, and when it gets to the end of the sound effect, and again here on the audio we can see exactly where the end of the sound effect is, and I'm going to put a marker in there. Actually I've put the marker on the footage by accident, so I'm going to click on the marker and press delete, come back down, click on the footage, and then press the marker in there. So where I want it to be playing around 200% rather than 100%, I'm going to scroll along to here, and I'm going to come down into our little drop box here where it's got the 100% and add a speed point. So if we look at the footage now, we have a speed point. Now a speed point is really simple to use. If we look at the bottom marker here with one mark, we can move this backwards and forwards, and this is just where the position in the footage where the speed marker is, and as we can see both sides are 100%. If we look up at the top, we can see we have a little marker with 2 points on. If I move this backwards and forwards, we can see the footage to the left is changing speed. Now I want to bring this up to 200%. Now I also want the 200% to finish at the same time as the speed sound effect. We know the speed sound effect finishes over marker 2, so I'm just going to bring the bottom marker and hold it over marker 2. So if I go back to the beginning and press play now, we can see the speed has changed exactly at the end of the sound effect, which is what we wanted to do. So now I'm happy with this. I can then finish the footage exactly where I wanted it to finish, which was above this marker here. So what I'm going to do is click on the footage, press B or go to this razor tool, and then hold it above the marker and click, and this will separate the footage. Now it's worth pointing out that this little tool here is the magnet tool. When the magnet tool is switched on, it will actually jump above markers and to the red timeline if you want to do any cuts. If you want to do some finer tuning and you don't want it to jump to anything, you can then click the magnet off and it won't jump over it. But for now, I'm going to leave it on. Now once I've decided I don't want this footage, I can then go back to the cursor by pressing A, or clicking on the cursor up here, clicking on the footage and pressing delete. And then let's see what we've got so far. It's looking good. Now if you've already seen my finished footage, you'll know that at the beginning I started off by zooming in and then zooming out. And this is really easy to do, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. So what I'm going to do now is press A, select the cursor and grab the footage and the soundtrack as well. And then I'm going to drag it across to the left. This is just creating space for us to drop some additional footage on. Next I'm going to go to where the speed ramp finishes, which is nicely marked in our soundtrack. I'm going to press B to get up the razor tool, and I'm going to click on both the footage and also I'm going to click on the soundtrack. I'm going to select the footage and the music, right click on it and press copy, or we can press Ctrl C. And then I'm going to make sure the red line here is back at the beginning and press Ctrl V. Now what this has done is it's copied and pasted our clip. Now I'm going to want this to be in reverse, so I'm then going to click on the footage, right click and press change clip speed. Now it's changed, for some reason it's changed the clip speed to 105%, so we're going to want this to be back up to 200%. And we also want it to be in reverse, so I'm going to check the reverse speed box and then press change and then replace. So now I've done that, I can then select all the clips to the right by dragging the cursor along and then drawing them back over to join on the end of the last clip. So now if I go back to the beginning and press space, now you may notice that ran a bit glitchy, and the reason for that is just there's a lot of processing power going into that, so the computer cannot keep up with the speed of the timeline. There's a lot going on here, reversing it and changing the speed. So if we want to see if it's a smooth transition, we can just click backwards in our timeline and then press the right cursor key and see that where the transition is, it's nice and smooth, so we know the footage matches up nicely. I've also noticed there's a small gap down here in the sound, so I'm just going to move the music clip along to start there. And if we're really fussy, we could clip off the beginning of the video, but it's only one frame, so I'm not terribly worried. Okay, so next we're going to want to add in our next scene. Now if we go back up to our footage in the top left hand corner, I've got 5 minutes of footage here, and I've already identified I want this section just here. So to select it, where I want it to begin, I've pressed I, and then where I wanted it to finish, I've pressed O. And we can see why I've finished it here, because the camera starts changing and I didn't like that. So I'm going to click on this piece of footage and drag it down onto the timeline. Now I've got to decide where I want it to finish. So I'm going to click onto the timeline where I want the video to start. I'm going to press play by pressing spacebar. Then I'm going to listen to the music and decide where I want the next clip to start. Just at the beginning of that sound there. So what I'm going to do is look in the audio section, and just here we can see is the bump where the sound effect starts. So I'm going to click on the audio and then press the marker, and then I know this is where I want my next scene to start. So I'm going to go and click the next scene, which is going to be the birds flying across the water. So again, I've already got it selected here. I know I wanted it to start where the birds enter the screen, and I want it to finish where the birds leave the screen. So I'm going to drag this over that marker, and now I'm going to play it through just to make sure it all matches up. So I've got the transition in the right place, but what I have noticed is that it's a really long piece of footage, and I'm going to want a speed ramp, which is another reason why I chose this piece of footage to go here, because we've got a pretty cool sound effect that work really well with a speed ramp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play through and decide where I want the speed ramp to finish. Just at that chime there. So again, I'm going to use this little dial here to zoom in and find out exactly where that chime is. Just here, and I've added in a little marker there. So the next thing I'm going to want to do is add in the speed ramp. I'm going to zoom out for this, and I'm going to right click and go to retime controls, and then I'm going to add in a speed point. Now the speed point isn't actually in the right place at the moment, so what I'm going to do now is scroll through the footage and decide where I want the speed ramp to stop, and this is just going to be as the birds are coming towards the centre of the footage. Just here looks good to me. So now I'm going to drag the bottom of the speed point over to the marker in the timeline, and then I'm going to go and grab the top one to speed everything up beforehand and drag it over the marker underneath. So this is now going to be sped up, and let's see how this looks. So I'm really happy with that, but the clip's still a bit long, so I'm going to speed ramp the end of it as well. So I've now got to decide where I want to start the speed ramp. So I'm going to scroll back to here, and I'm going to press spacebar and decide where I want the next speed ramp to start. Just on that sound effect. So I'm going to go back to that sound effect, click on the audio and put in a marker, and then I'm going to add a speed point in. And this is where I'm going to want to start the next speed ramp. And now I've got to decide where I want the clip to finish. So again, I'm going to press spacebar and listen to where I want the clip to finish. Just there on that beat. So I'm going to zoom in, make sure I've got it in the right place, and then I'm going to add in another speed point by pressing on the arrow and pressing add speed point. I'm then going to get the bottom part of the speed point and drag it to the end of the clip. I'm going to extend the footage out a bit more by dragging it and then clicking on top of speed point and moving it back to the marker, and then I can then click on the end of the clip again and then drag it to the marker like so. So this should have what we want now. So I'm going to click back to the beginning and press spacebar. Perfect. Okay guys, so far we've learned how to drop our footage onto the timeline, how to reverse the speed, and how to add a speed ramp in. But something we haven't looked at is how to change the speed ramp gradually over time rather than change the speed instantly. So I'm going to use the next piece of footage to show you how to do this. So now we've seen how to select what part of our footage we want, how to drop it onto the timeline, how to add a speed ramp, and how to reverse the speed. What I haven't yet shown you is how to gradually speed up or slow down a clip. So to do this, I'm going to use this footage here of the water. Now I've shot this water at 60 frames per second, so we can bring it in really slowly. At the moment though, it's going to play at 24 frames a second, so what we need to do is right click on it, go to clip attributes, and then drop down and click on 60 frames per second and press OK. So now when we drop this onto our timeline, it should be in slow motion. Lovely. So now I'm going to decide where I want the footage to finish. Just on that beat. Which I believe is just here. So I'm going to put a marker in and then zoom back out again. And I'm just going to scroll through to see if it sounds like the marker's in the right place. I'm happy with that. So now I know where I want it to finish. I can click on the footage, right click, and go into retime controls. In here I'm going to add a speed point. So what I want to do is start the footage off fast and then bring it back down into slow motion. So I'm going to grab the top of the speed point and drag it to the left, which is going to speed up all the footage to the left. And I'm going to see if I like the speed. And actually I think I might like it a bit faster. So what I'm going to do is drag the bottom part of the speed point along and then drag the top part across to the left again. And this should really be fast now. Let's see how it looks. Okay, so now we don't need the end of this clip, so what I'm going to do is press B to again bring in the razor tool, and then press A, click on the rest of the footage and press delete. So now I'm going to make the speed change gradual. To do this, we're going to click on the footage, right click, and bring in the retime curve. So we might need a bit more space to do this, so we can get ourselves more space by coming onto this line here and dragging it up, and then coming down to this line here and dragging this down. Okay, so now we've got the retime curve up. Now actually we've got it on retime frame instead of retime speed, so we need to change this. Now there is usually a little icon here which we can't see, and this is because we haven't got enough space within the clip. So if I zoom here and by dragging this dial to the right, we can now see that I've got retime frame prop up here. And then click down on this arrow and go to retime speed. And I'm going to bring that across. And actually we don't need the retime frame in, so I'm going to click the retime frame to get rid of it. Okay, we can narrow this back up again now and scroll along so it's in the center. So if we click on the line it will bring up our key point here, which is the exact point where the speed changes. And from here we can then click on the curve line, and this will make it a gradual speed change. So if I play through now, you can see it was more gradual. If we still want it to be a bit more gradual, we can pull this over to the right and we can really stretch out that curve, and then it's going to be pretty much the whole clip's going to be slowing down. Okay, so I think this pretty much just about covers everything we're going to want to know about getting files onto the timeline, getting them to the right size, and speed ramping them the way we'd like to speed ramp them. So what we need to do now is finish dropping everything on the timeline and make sure it ends in the right place with the music. So I'm going to jump forward to that point. So here is pretty much the finished video, and as you can see, the music down the bottom here goes on further than the footage. So what I've done is I've chosen a part of the music where it comes to a natural finish to finish the footage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just clip this off here. So if I play it now, we can see what it sounds like. And I've just decided I'm not going to use the rest of that, so I'm going to get rid of it, and we're going to listen to it now. Okay, so that's everything we're going to need to know now to get everything onto the timeline, to match the music, and have the speed ramps where we want them. The last thing we need to do is look at colour grading. So in the last section, I actually colour graded it before I edited it. I've got my own reasons for doing that, but most people would do it this way around, so I'm going to show you this way around. So now I've jumped back in time, I can actually show you how to colour grade it. So if we go along the icons down the bottom here, and we click on the colour icon, so now we've come through to the colour grading part of the software. Now we're just going to go over some basic things that can really improve our video. The first thing I'm going to do is right click on the footage and press show scopes. Now if you haven't done this before, you'll actually have 4 icons, but I'm only going to want to use the waveform and the vector scope. So what I'm going to do is click through to this and then just make sure we've got the waveform here and the vector scope here. Now the waveform is going to show how bright and dark the picture is. The bottom is the shadows and the top part is the highlights. So if we haven't got anything touching the top part of the graph, it means the highlights are a bit dull, and if we haven't got anything touching the bottom parts of the graph, it means the shadows are a bit brighter than they should be. But as we can actually see here, the shadows are pretty much spot on, but the highlights do need a bit of work. So what we're going to do is go over to these wheels here. So if we go over here and we look at the lift, this is the shadows basically. So what we're going to do is, I'll just show you quickly, if we turn this to red, we can see that our shadows have turned red. I'm just going to click on this little arrow here and this will reset everything. And then the gamma is going to be our midtones. So again, if I push everything red in the midtones, you can see the midtones are more affected by that than the highlights and the shadows. If we go over to the gain and I drag this over to the red, we can see it's mainly the highlights that are affected by the red the most. And I'm going to click this back to reset. So the dial here is going to affect all the highlights. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this to the right until we've got the waveform touching the top of the graph, like so. And we can also come over to the curves here. If you want to add contrast, you can put a bit of an S shape in and it will give it a bit more punch. I'm just going to dial that down a bit. And there we go. Some people like less contrast. I personally quite like a bit of contrast. This is maybe a bit too much contrast, but you can have a play with it and get it exactly how you like it. Okay, so if we come here, we can have a look at saturation, and I might just boost this up a little bit. There we go, it just brings a bit more colour into the picture. Okay, but if we go over to the vector scope now, this will show us what our white balance is like. Now actually, for drone footage, this probably isn't too useful. This is just a workflow I've got used to using. But if you do want to change the colour temperature, you can click on the 2 here, go to the temperature area down here, and you can drag this left and right, and it will change the colour temperature of the video. Again, I don't think that's necessary for this, so I'm going to reset it by pressing Ctrl Z. Right, okay, so let's look at our next piece of footage. Now here, where we've actually put splits in the footage, we can see we're going to have to redo the colour grading. But there is a way around this. If we go back to our first piece of footage, right click on it and press grab still, this will give us a little preset colour grading icon in the top left hand corner here. And then if we click on the next piece of footage, we can then go back up to the little icon here and press apply grade, and we've got the exact same grade. And then again for our next shot, we can then go in here again and press apply grade, and we've got the same grade for the same shot. Okay, so now if we go through to our next piece of footage that we actually need to edit, we can see actually This has come out really nice already. It really doesn't need too much editing at all. The waveform looks pretty good there. So then I'm going to go on to the next piece of footage, which is the birds flying across. And as we can see here, we've got a big part of the shadows missing, and we can even see by looking at the picture, it's not very dark at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is go over to the lift, and I'm going to drag this to the left to drop the shadows down until the red part's touching the graph here. And we can see now we've got a much better look to the image. And if we play this through, that looks pretty good to me. If I really want to, I can come down to the graph here and drop this down to make the birds darker, and bring this up to make the sky brighter, and it will show the birds with a bit more contrast. But it's up to you how you want the final video to look. That was way too excessive, by the way, but again, it's something you can look at and get down to fine detail. And then on the last piece, we can look at it again, and we're going to look at the waveform. We can also actually use the graph here to drop the shadows if you want to do that, which is probably a bit easier. And actually, I'm going to add a bit more contrast in by putting a little S shape in the curve, and then press spacebar to scroll through it. So once you're finished and you've color graded every clip to the way you'd like it color graded, we can then click through to deliver. Now in deliver, it's just going to basically save our footage. So what we're going to do is decide how to save the footage. I personally usually just go straight through to YouTube, select the folder I want, give it a name, and then press add to render. And then when we press start render, it will start rendering the footage to where we've selected. It will take a bit of time, so this is a fairly short video, and it's still going to take probably about a minute to do. But actually, I don't need this, so I'm going to stop it here. And the chances are at home, you might not want to be making it for YouTube. So in that case, let's go through to the custom settings and see exactly what we might like. So again, we need to name our footage. So we're going to call this cinematic footage. And then we're going to save it to wherever we like to save it. So next thing we're going to do is look at what settings we want to export the video. Now because we've shot with a Mavic Mini and we can only start off with an MP4 file, the likelihood is we only really want to save it as an MP4. We're going to come down to here and we're going to press MP4. We're going to leave the codec as it is, and then we're going to scroll down to resolution. Now if you've shot at 1080, I recommend leaving it at 1080, but if you shot at 2.7K, you may want to change that to 2.7K. And then again we can come down and look at the quality. I personally would leave it at best quality and pretty much leave everything else as it is. Once you're happy with it, press add to render queue, and then you can start to render. Okay guys, so this is going to take a few minutes to do. Once it's finished, it'll save it through to the folder and you can have a look at it. Okay guys, so now that's completed, we can go through to that folder. So now we can go through to the folder and click on the footage. And we can see that the footage is nice and smooth, and where the processor couldn't keep up with the computer, there's no problem there. Okay guys, so what I'm going to do now is play my final video for you to watch if you'd like to see it. Otherwise, I hope you've got a lot out of this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.